is immortality? This is a question Zheng Qingzhen has pondered for many years. Looking at the bustling crowd outside, he also wanted to go out for a walk. However, the sunlight overhead was still as scorching and merciless as ever. At this moment, hiding in the shadows, he could only helplessly look at the statue of the deity beside him. Although the deity's statue seemed to have a smiling expression, he sensed a hint of mockery in its eyes. At that moment, Zheng Qingzhen suddenly realized something. He felt that becoming some kind of ethereal, bullshit immortal was not his goal. Because for him, immortality itself was becoming immortal. Now, possessing Gao Lao's body, he waved his hand, and a dense swarm of corpses surged out again. Seeing the situation turn dire, Lao Ba immediately picked up Shang Hui, preparing to evacuate the mine according to plan. But he never expected that Zhao would be standing firmly in place. He even handed them his clothes and glasses, urging them to leave first. It turned out that after witnessing the corpses of miners scattered everywhere and the tortured Shang Hui, Zhang Za's soul-searching questions became even more unsettling. At this moment, he had made up his mind to make this bastard who harmed the innocent die right here. Seeing Zhao Yi's determined expression, Lao Ba didn't say much, and simply beckoned his two disciples to leave quickly. Unknowingly, Shang Hui was already on Zhang Za's back. After all, as a disciple, he should naturally bear more of the burden. But at this moment, Zha Bao was clearly preoccupied. He kept looking back, his eyes filled with worry. Seeing this, Lao Ba tried to comfort him, telling him to relax and not to worry, because Zhao, with that kind of look, had never lost. Hearing this, Zhang Zha felt slightly relieved, but he still had one question in his mind. Why did Zhao give them his clothes and glasses? Then, he received an unexpected answer. He's afraid of ruining them. This answer almost made Zhang Zha stumble. But Lao Ba didn't mind. Although wearing this outfit felt a bit out of character for him, it reminded him of his bald master, who used to wear the same outfit. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but compare himself. In an instant, he became extremely confident. Indeed, I look better in it. But showing off is one thing. Escaping the mine quickly is the priority now. Lao Ba sped up again, urging everyone to keep up. But after a short while, Zhang Zha was exhausted and panting heavily. Seeing this, Lao Ba quickly stopped, ready to take over carrying Shang Hui. However, Zhang Zha repeatedly declined, saying this bit of physical work was nothing to him. Besides, carrying Shang Hui himself allowed him to talk to her occasionally. Of course, after saying this, Zhang Zha couldn't help but add a jab. You should still be careful with your back. Lao Ma Dao heartily agreed with this. After all, he really didn't want to see his master fling Shang Hui away again. Lao Ba suddenly felt awkward and could only turn around and continue running wildly. If you really can't carry her anymore, just tell me. But he hadn't run more than a few steps when he suddenly slammed on the brakes. Seeing Master solemnly signaling to stop, Zhang Zha immediately became alert. Could there be danger ahead? But before he could gather his thoughts, he found that Master was already sprawled on a cart of gold ore. Turned out Lao Ba thought, since we're here, it'd be impolite not to take some gold back. What a classic since we're here excuse. This scene left Zhang Zha and Lao Ma speechless. But the next moment, they suddenly felt that Master's words made perfect sense. So, mimicking him, they swarmed forward, grabbing handfuls of gold and stuffing them into their pockets. And Lao Dao was even less reserved, tearing open his clothes and gathering gold into his arms. But as they kept taking gold, Zhang Zha suddenly hesitated. Is there any Shang Hui in this gold? He wondered. Lao Ba immediately replied upon hearing this. No, this gold here is clean. And at this moment, Lao Dao had a new deduction. Zheng Qingzhen's purpose in performing alchemy here, I'm afraid, is to infuse Shang Hui into the gold. Hearing this, Zhang Zha had another question in his mind. Then why choose gold to infuse Shang Hui? Meanwhile, on Zhao Yi's side, Gao Lao was slowly approaching. Although one of his eyes had been injured earlier, it didn't diminish his arrogant and sinister aura. Zhao was not polite either, and directly activated the Jing Lei points in his arms. Instantly, lightning burst forth from his body, engulfing his entire body in electric light. Do no evil, practice good. This is the most basic professional ethic of a CHU Wu. And you are not worthy to be a CHU Wu. Zhao glared and shot out like lightning. Even in Gao Lao's eyes, this scene was barely a flash of blue lightning. At that moment, a rare look of shock appeared in his eyes. But before he could react, Zhao Yi's fierce attack came crashing down. Caught completely off guard, he was smashed to the ground. Then, Zhao lifted him up by the head and delivered a heavy punch. This punch was incredibly powerful, aimed directly at Gao Lao's cheek. With a loud thump, Zheng Qingzhen, possessing Gao Lao's body, was jolted out. Zheng Qingzhen desperately tried to re-enter the body and hysterically retorted, I never wanted to be a CHU Wu in the first place. I just wanted to study Shang and Shang people more easily. After regaining his body, he swung his fists and collided them forcefully, instantly creating a visible azure light sphere around himself. Before Zhao could defend, he was blasted back dozens of steps by this sudden, powerful attack. And the dried corpses scattered on the ground were even more vulnerable, scattering in all directions. Even the heavy crimson coffin was pushed to the edge of the black water pool. Just like before, he said with a deadpan face, coldly, I am grateful that you brought him here. He is a legendary treasure. Zhao remained silent.
是的，若不是亲眼所见。
He still couldn't believe that someone could return to normal after Shang transformation.
而这也是高老认为的希望所在。
He thought, with that young man, he would never need to change bodies again.
萧也没有驳斥他的美梦。
He just asked coldly the question that had been weighing on his heart for so long. How are you not afraid of sunlight? But this question was met with Gao Lao's extremely mocking rhetorical question. How not afraid of sunlight? Are Shang people afraid of light? This retort struck Zhao like a thunderbolt, deafening him. Zhao couldn't help but freeze for a moment. At the same moment, Gao Lao had already closed in on him and threw a punch. In haste, Zhao the quickly activated Jing Lei and raised his arms to block. Instantly, electric sparks flew everywhere. It sounded like a thunderclap out of nowhere. Actually, the answer to this question, Zheng Qingzhen had pondered for a long time as well. Why is Shang destroyed by sunlight, while Shang people can walk under the blazing sun? It's because Shang people have a constant source of Shang Hui to resist the sun's destructive power. So, as long as there is enough strong Shang Hui, he can live forever, immortal. And immortality is becoming immortal. Watching Gao Lao launch another fierce attack, Zhao the ducked low, narrowly dodging it. Then, seizing the opportunity, he grabbed the opponent's arm and used the momentum to maneuver, performing a near-perfect grappling technique right there. And at this moment, he finally had a chance to examine the golden hand closely. He remembered that the palm of the golden hand was hollow before, but now it was filled with a glistening blue bead. Could this thing also be made of gold? In that moment of distraction, Gao Lao suddenly exerted his strength. Instantly, the bead flashed blue, and an incredibly powerful surge of Shang Hui coursed through Gao Lao's arms. With just one strike, Zhao was sent flying. At that moment, disbelief was written all over Zhao Yi's face. How could there be such intense Shang Hui in there? In a daze, he felt like he had grasped something crucial. But unfortunately, he didn't have time to ponder it. Using the force of the impact, Zhao flipped back a few steps, buying himself a moment to catch his breath. But Gao Lao had no intention of letting up. He clenched his golden fist, and the bead erupted again with a blinding azure light. Even from a distance, he began to charge up his attack. You should consider yourself lucky, the person who can force me to use this golden treasure. You are the first. As soon as he finished speaking, the fist wind, carrying immense power, arrived in an instant. Seeing that the opponent was serious, Zhao also stopped holding back. He directly clenched his palms and activated the Zheng Shen technique. In an instant, the two forces collided fiercely. The entire mine began to tremble violently. This strike could be described as extremely powerful. Even Zhang Zha and the others, who had run far away, were shocked and stopped in their tracks. The tremor was already so intense from a distance. The center of the battle between the two was even more unbearable. They saw the scarlet coffin flying up and directly falling into the black water. Suffering the same fate was also the huge alchemy furnace that had been suspended in the pool. As for the area around their feet, even the topsoil was scraped away, leaving it incredibly flat. Currently, the two seemed to be in a stalemate. Perhaps feeling that Gao Lao would not evade the question, Zhao asked again, "How did you inject such strong Shang Hui into the gold?" But Gao Lao's answer shocked him greatly, because the answer was the opposite of what he asked. This is not injection, but extraction. Shang Hui inherently exists within gold. Many years ago, Guangbai village was just a remote mountain village. At that time, Zheng Qingzhen occupied the body of the then village chief and was urging a group of villagers to dig up coffins overnight. Although some people couldn't believe these were ancestral items of the village chief. But due to the old man's authority, The villagers dared not disobey. Before long, they dug out 2 scarlet coffins from this place. The village chief was not old at this time. His full head of black hair made him look much more energetic than before. He looked at the 2 red coffins without saying a word, as if pondering something. But at this moment, a beam of blinding flashlight suddenly lit up in the distance. They saw a group of people noisily surrounding them. Seeing what the villagers had dug out, they started quarreling and scrambling to seize them. They were the contractors for this area, planning to build a southern paradise here. So, in their view, as long as the land was assigned to them, then everything on it would belong to them. These words aroused the villagers' dissatisfaction because they had not signed the contract at all. So this land had not yet changed ownership and could not be considered the developer's territory. Watching the 2 groups facing off, the village chief remained unmoved, still watching with disdain. Suddenly, a flash of light went off. Someone was actually taking pictures at the scene. They saw a man in a floral shirt, revealing a mouth of black teeth, smiling and saying he had captured today's headline. Moreover, he even took it upon himself to think up the headline for them. That was, Village Chief digs up graves late at night, unexpectedly unearths 2 blood-red lacquered coffins, alarming local authorities. Subsequently, the village chief turns them in for credit and happily receives a reward of 500 yuan and a banner. After saying this, he then walked forward to inspect the quality of the coffins. Just with a quick glance, he judged that the red coffin was at least 300 years old. Even more bizarrely, he couldn't resist taking a shallow lick. The strange, earthy, fishy smell made him exclaim, "Wonderful!" saying that this coffin was very unusual. Then, he suddenly looked at the village chief and asked meaningfully, "The things inside, couldn't they be antiques?" A series of light, seemingly self-talk, sounded like banter, but the threat was already fully revealed. He got up with a grin and started negotiating with the village chief. Meeting today is fate. It could also be considered destiny in the dark. Let's be friends. Saying this, he pushed the camera in his hand forward, preparing to buy a coffin. Judging by the looks of it, it was clear he was planning to get something for nothing. The village chief remained expressionless as before. He stared at the camera without saying a word. Seeing this, how could the villagers dare to overthink? They hurriedly rushed forward aggressively, saying that this was ancestral property of the village chief and could not be handed over. Unexpectedly, before they finished speaking, the village chief suddenly made a move. He gently took the camera and said meaningfully, "Deal." The result was predictable. One of the red coffins was intercepted halfway and taken away. The villagers were indignant. Are we really just going to let them carry it away like this? Upon hearing this, the village chief, his face suddenly turned gloomy. Even the hand holding the camera began to show bulging veins. Looking at the receding red coffin, he said with considerable disdain, "Just let them keep it for me for a while." After saying these words, he suddenly called out to the group of people, "Hey! When you open the coffin, remember to prepare some gold." Saying this, he even laughed. His mouth full of gold teeth looked particularly striking. looking at the puzzled expression of the man in the floral shirt. He probably didn't understand the deeper meaning of the village chief's words at all. So later, that tragedy occurred. He did prepare gold, but it seemed he didn't use it correctly. And Zheng Qingzhen, who caused the current situation, changed hosts once again, which is the village chief's grandson from back then, Chun Ran. He used gold as bones to forge this body he has now, and even more so, with the extracted massive amount of Shang Hui, forced Zhao to use the Zheng Shen technique. Zhao naturally didn't believe this guy's explanation. How could Shang Hui possibly exist in gold? But Gao Lao still insisted expressionlessly, saying it was because Shang Hui was hidden deep, so it needed to be extracted. Saying this, he launched another fierce attack on Zhao. It was at this moment, seeing Gao Lao was within striking distance, Zhao flicked his sleeve and directly conjured to golden needles. But Gao Lao didn't give him a chance to strike at all. Each move was fiercer than the last, and the speed was even faster. In the end, Zhao had been forced into a corner with no way out. Watching Gao Lao swing his deadly fist again, Zhao finally made his move. They saw him snap his fingers with lightning speed. As a crisp snapping sound rang out, Gao Lao's body was instantly covered in Jing Lei power. In an instant, Gao Lao's body began to tremble uncontrollably. Even his arms, which were originally attacking fiercely, lost control and drooped down. Seizing the opportunity, Zhao decisively struck. Grabbing the golden needles, he stabbed them into Gao Lao's wrist. Forced by the Jing Lei power, Gao Lao was temporarily unable to counterattack. He could only watch helplessly as Zhao pierced through his arm. Zhao did not stop, but while firmly holding the golden needles, he also covered Gao Lao's golden hand with Jing Lei, only to hear a ka-cha sound. Gao Lao's entire right hand instantly disintegrated. Countless parts scattered and flew away. Accompanying this was also a huge explosive force. Gao Lao was extremely shocked. He couldn't believe it no matter what, that he would unknowingly suffer such a great loss. Along with his golden hand flying off, was also the blue bead filled with Shang Hui power. Zhao quickly grabbed it with sharp eyes and quick hands, and prepared to destroy it on the spot. But as soon as he held the thing in his palm, the Shang Hui power of the bead surged back upwards, causing Zhao to become somewhat dazed. In that instant, an unbearable scene reappeared before his eyes. There, his master's arms were completely severed, falling on a piece of scarlet land. Suddenly, Zhao woke up. He endured the severe pain and forcibly clenched his fist. The entire bead instantly emitted a puff of gray smoke. By the time he threw the thing out again, the blue light inside the bead suddenly dissipated, and even cracks appeared on it the moment it touched the ground. Too painful, Zhao looked at his palm and trembled uncontrollably. Seeing that a part of his glove was already damaged, he immediately felt that something was wrong with this thing. Thinking of this, Zhao Yi's eyes turned cold and questioned Gao Lao what exactly he was extracting as Shang Hui. Gao Lao had already recovered at this moment. The golden needles that had been bent out of shape by being pinched also fell to the ground. Obviously, within his body, an immense rage was gathering. What Shang Hui? You'll know when you're dead. Gao Lao stood up with a roar. The dilapidated minor corpses around, even more so, they were being attracted in an extremely strange way. In just a moment, a new palm was formed on his right arm. No, this is no longer a palm, but rather a child's cadaver claw. Meanwhile, the group who just stuffed their pockets with gold are fleeing. But before they ran for long, Lao Ba waved to stop them again. With the previous experience in mind, Zhang Zha was noticeably less wary now. Perhaps Master has spotted another treasure? But Master only twitched his ears, and then suddenly led them to run ahead again, saying, "It's ahead." Zhang Zha was bewildered, asked curiously, "What's ahead?" Before long, he also seemed to hear it. That's the sound of running water. Old Ma was instantly delighted. Water sounds, which means there's water flowing in or out nearby. Whether it's flowing in or out, it means the exit is not far away. In his excitement, Old Ma took off running forward, completely forgetting Master was standing motionless ahead. So predictably, Master's broad shoulders directly hit his nose. Old Ma fell to the ground, groaning in pain. Even Zhang Zha was a bit curious why Master would suddenly stop walking. When he stepped forward to take a look, he immediately saw on the ground, in front of Master, many miners' corpses lying haphazardly. Lao Ba was also a bit curious. He checked these dried corpses, one by one, and immediately discovered a common feature. That is, in these dried corpses, the Shang Hui had completely disappeared. And that's secondary. More importantly, the necks of these dried corpses were all broken. Hearing this, Zhang Zha and Old Ma were both shocked. Lao Ba didn't speak further, because the more he looked, the more he felt something was wrong. Just now, based on the posture of these corpses when they fell and the neck injuries, he had basically reconstructed what had happened here. This technique, he was very familiar with it. If he wasn't mistaken, Gongling should have been here. This is the most shocking battle since the beginning of Chu Wu. Also reinterpreted, what is meant by good ultimately triumphs over evil. The two sides in the battle. One is Zheng Qingzhen, a Qing Dynasty loyalist. The other is the current Chu Wu, Zhao the. Of course, this battle can also be said to be a powerful showdown between two generations of Chu Wu. However, although Zhao is a junior, he relied on his nimble figure and forcefully dismantled Gao Lao's golden hand into a pile of parts and forcibly destroyed a Shang Hui bead. Enraged and humiliated, Gao Lao roared thunderously, condensing the corpses of many miners into a terrifying corpse claw. Then, with lightning speed, it pounced straight forward. If Zhao the hadn't dodged in time, his left foot would probably have been cut off on the spot. But even so, Gao Lao's powerful strike also sent Zhao the flying backward. It seems this guy has been driven to desperation. Sure enough, in the next moment, Zhao the seemed to have discovered something terrifying and suddenly widened his eyes. A white light suddenly lit up. Gao Lao's skeletal giant claw was actually wrapped in a layer of lightning power. He couldn't be more familiar with this scene, because this is exactly one of Chu Wu's secret techniques, Jing Lei. He didn't expect that Zheng Qingzhen, possessing someone else's body, could actually unleash Jing Lei to such an extent. But reality wouldn't give him time to be distracted. Gao Lao swung his arm horizontally. The force of 10,000 Zhan of lightning power smashed head-on. This strike was terrifying, and directly slammed Zhao onto the mountain wall. The violent impact back and forth made him cough up a mouthful of blood. Gao Lao became even more disdainful upon seeing this. You, an unknown nobody, also dare to try to kill me? Do you know, in these 300 years, what I have experienced? I thought this guy was going to start telling some secrets or something. But unexpectedly, he suddenly changed the subject, shouting, "I want to become immortal. No one can stop me. I will not die again." In his rage, he once again condensed immense lightning power. This child's momentum compared to before was obviously even greater. Zhao the Just wanted to dodge, but found that he couldn't move at all. Looking down, he realized his ankles had been firmly grasped by several dried corpses. At this critical moment of life and death, he had to activate Zheng Shen again to protect himself. Sure enough, in the next moment, an incredibly terrifying force of lightning struck directly. Once again, Zhao was slammed against the mountain wall. Even the mountain, of unknown thickness, was shaken to create cracks. Gao Lao roared and followed closely. Die! Zhao had nowhere to dodge. His eyes suddenly became serious. He clenched his hands in front of his chest. Then he closed his eyes. In an instant, he seemed to enter some mysterious state. He could feel the light rain in the mountains and forests at this moment, could feel the snails slowly crawling on the leaves, and could also feel the motionless frogs in the lotus pond. This is a strange state. It is also a realm of subtlety. Zhao took a deep breath, gently uttered two words, Thorough Comprehension. When he opened his eyes again, lightning was already flashing before him, and Gao Lao's corpse claw was already close at hand. It's time. Zhao clenched his fist fiercely, lowly shouted a word, "Open." In an instant, the entire mine roared and rumbled, as if it would collapse immediately. Countless mine rails broke and flew around. Even the alchemy furnace, suspended in midair by several thick chains, fell into the corpse water. At this moment, although Zhao was being pressed against the wall by Gao Lao's head, seemingly powerless to recover, Gao Lao suddenly felt his hair stand on end, because on the shoulders of this guy in front of him, a very strange blue ring actually lit up. Then, a glowing dot appeared in the middle of the blue ring. In a daze, Zhao grabbed Gao Lao's arm, muttering something in his mouth. Cause and effect are real. Karma is self-born. The one who deserves to die is you. After saying that, he directly pressed a palm on Gao Lao's chest. As a burst of red light shot past, Gao Lao's body flew out in response, and Zheng Qingzhen's spirit soul instantly left his body. This move is called Wuji Scripture Thunder. It's incredibly powerful, directly piercing through the mountain, stabbing towards the vast night sky outside the mountain. Zheng Qingzhen's statue cracked, looking even more dilapidated than before. And inside the mountain, Gao Lao also lay on the ground silently. Is it finally over? Zhao stared at the ground, somewhat lost in thought. But in the next moment, a familiar feeling suddenly came from behind. He suddenly turned his head to look, and saw a bright red footprint on the ground not far away. And this was exactly Shang's footprint. He didn't act rashly, but quietly sensed it. Sure enough, in just an instant, something quietly came up behind him. Zhao Yi's eyes turned cold. Subconsciously, he swung his arm and grabbed. This grab was precise, exactly pinching Zheng Qingzhen's neck. He was in great pain at this moment, wanting to break free from Zhao Yi's hand. But Zhao would no longer give him this chance. The power of Jing Lei burst out from his body, causing him to scream incessantly. This is the feeling of death. He didn't want to experience it again. Zhao Yi's eyes were cold and stern. He gave Zheng Qingzhen a final warning. What exactly is the Shang Hui you are refining? This is the last time I'm asking you. Here is 200 years ago. The Manchu Qing society already shows signs of decline. A desolate, deathly aura is spreading from the common people. Just as you see at this moment, several emaciated stray dogs by the roadside are dividing and eating the corpse of a dead person. In contrast, is this young man in front of you? He is lucky. Luckily, he is still alive. But he is also unlucky. Unluckily, he is lonely and starving. He came to town to beg for food, but people simply ignored him. They directly locked their doors and drove him away. Indeed, in this world, is even living so difficult? The young man, hungry and cold, walked forward in a daze. At this moment, he could no longer hold on and collapsed to the ground. But what he didn't know was, at the moment he fell, an old doctor wearing a bamboo hat suddenly stopped. When the young man woke up again, it was already dark. He found himself in a dilapidated temple, and there was an old man beside him. The old man, wearing a bamboo hat, said nothing, just silently roasting something in his hand. The air was filled with a rich aroma of meat, making the young man couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He saw clearly. What was being roasted on the fire seemed to be a wild dog. The wild dog's eyes reflected the firelight, staring straight at him. The young man also met its gaze, but his eyes were empty and devoid of emotion, as if what was on the stick was just a piece of meat. Suddenly, he coughed again. The old illness relapsed, causing him to cough up a trace of blood. But what he didn't expect was, the old man opposite him suddenly handed over a few pills. The pills were as black as ink, emitting a strange smell. The young man was still a little hesitant at first, but eventually took them. Since then, he followed this old doctor, traveling north and south. When there was work, they would see patients. When there was no work, they would sit and rest. Although life was not wealthy, but in any case, the young man survived, and he would no longer go hungry. Time passed day by day like this, and a smile gradually appeared on the young man's face. It was the feeling of finding reliance, the joy of finding a home.
但美中不足的是，
But the only flaw was, one day, the old doctor was helping him shave his head, but he coughed violently again. Fortunately, seemingly inexhaustible.
少年也像往常一样，
He took it without hesitation and swallowed it. But this time, the black pill seemed to have lost its effect. He suddenly vomited blood without warning and fell to the ground, never to rise again. The old doctor was already used to seeing life and death. He silently picked up the young man's body and then threw it into a deep ditch in the wilderness. However, living together day and night, there would always be some feelings. So this time, he took off his bamboo hat. Perhaps he was mourning for the young man, but he didn't know that the disease on the young man's body had unknowingly infiltrated his body. When he saw himself coughing up blood, he subconsciously reached into his pocket. In that paper packet were the black pills he always kept prepared. Zheng Qingzhen was just about to swallow them, but suddenly stopped as if by some divine intervention. He stared at the pills he had made for a long time, and then sighed in disappointment. Then he threw all the pills out. One by one, they rolled down into the several jong deep ditch, and in that ditch, corpses were already everywhere. From the day the young man left, Zheng Qingzhen became ill. In addition to coughing, he also often had nightmares. In those nightmares, he could see many, many children standing outside the door, staring straight at him. It was chilling. Unsurprisingly, he woke up in fright. Covered in cold sweat, he sat up, looking at the bloodstains on his chest, feeling even more despair in his heart. In panic, he hurried to the pharmacy, grabbed a handful of black pills, and stuffed them into his mouth. But unexpectedly, as soon as the pills entered his mouth, he coughed them all out. Yes, these pills are completely useless. Enraged, Zheng Qingzhen directly overturned the table. If it weren't for the heavy medicine furnace, it might have also been kicked over by him. Helpless, he curled up in the corner and cried non-stop, his voice full of desolation. The prescription for the black pills was torn up by him. It faintly recorded the way to eradicate tuberculosis. That is to use the temple's hair of a 9-year-old child as a medicinal guide, and then decoct and take it. But looking at it now, this so-called prescription is completely useless. Later, one rainy night, Zheng Qingzhen saw a young man running away in town. Perhaps because the ground was slippery due to the rain. The young man lost his footing and fell directly to the ground. This also gave the two men in black following behind an opportunity. One of them pointed his fingers together, and instantly lightning burst forth, and then pressed it directly on the young man's temple, along with a hysterical scream. An extremely terrifying ghost face suddenly sprang out. This scene happened to be seen by Zheng Qingzhen, who was passing by. Originally thought that the rain was too loud and did not attract their attention. But Zheng Qingzhen's cough directly made that ghost-like guy discover the target. In an instant, Zheng Qingzhen found that thing rushing towards him. He didn't even react, and had already lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he found himself in a dilapidated temple. It's also laughable to say, This dilapidated temple was the very one where he had rescued the young man. In front of him was also a warm fire and a man in black. Seeing him wake up, the man in black gestured at him, probably asking him if he had seen something strange. Zheng Qingzhen immediately understood. He instantly thought of that disheveled, ghost-like guy. In an instant, beads of cold sweat immediately covered his forehead. Seeing this scene, the man in black had already understood. He winked at his companion at the door, and then handed Zheng Qingzhen a stack of pills. Zheng Qingzhen was surprised for a moment, but when he saw his chest, also covered with such pills, he immediately realized he had encountered experts. Zheng Qingzhen was extremely grateful, clasping his hands and bowing his head in worship, already regarding the two men in black as his saviors. Then, the next day, he was taken to a Taoist temple. Looking at the many disciples in the temple, his heart was filled with hope, and given his identity as a doctor. He was also lucky to be assigned to help in the scripture library. And from that time on, he began to come into contact with Chu Wu, contact with Shang people, and also learned that beyond this world, there is another completely different world. But even with the support of King Yun Temple's pills, he still did not get rid of his deeply rooted tuberculosis. Finally, one night, he collapsed weakly. Although he was dying at this moment, he did not faint. In a daze, he didn't know if he was starting to dream again, because the children, who had only appeared in his nightmares before, were now all blocking the door. No, this time is different. They seem to be ready to come in. Zheng Qingzhen was so frightened that he pulled up the sheet, burying himself deeply under it. This way, he shouldn't be able to see them, right? But unfortunately, the severe pain in his arm made him unable to endure it anymore. He cried out miserably and sat up, only to find that he was already surrounded by hateful children, and they seemed to be about to devour him alive. But just at this moment, Zheng Qingzhen suddenly realized something was wrong, because there was a child standing at the door, motionless, seemingly not intending to participate at all. But when he carefully looked at the other child's appearance, he realized that on that child's face was actually written a big character, death. Just one glance, Zheng Qingzhen felt like he couldn't breathe. He could feel what was standing opposite him was not a child at all. Instead, it's a terrifying, vengeful ghost. But at this moment, I am so weak and helpless. I can't muster any resistance. That night, Zheng Qingzhen died, but he came back to life. He rose from his own blood and became Shang.